Me, 55 female, and my husband, 55 male, have two biological children, 31 female and 29 female. 16 years ago, we started fostering and took in Sally, 30 female, when she was 16. We knew she came from a background of being SA, but did not know many details and didn't pressure her into talking about it. But of course still did our best to help her and treat her equally to our other children. A couple times, my husband thought she was flirting with him, but he wrote it off as him perceiving something differently than what it was. Then, when she was 17, she approached him and touched him inappropriately. He immediately shut that down, and she apologized. And after he came to me about it, we then had a discussion about how that was not at all appropriate, and she apologized again and said she didn't know what she was thinking. We then started having her see a therapist and would make sure my husband would not be alone with her unless necessary. You would think we'd contact a social worker and get her in a different home, but she had a couple months until she graduated and was going to dorm in college, so we figured it would be best not to disrupt things too much for her last couple months. We would still welcome her to come back during her breaks, and she had a very good relationship with our other daughters. One day when she was 20 and back home on break, she approached my husband while he was in the kitchen grabbing a midnight snack while the rest of us were sleeping, and took her shirt off in front of him. He came and got me, and we told her she needed to leave. After that, we told her she would not be welcome in our home anymore, but we would continue to financially support her until she graduated, would not tell anyone else what happened, and we would still be cordial if we ever saw her in public, as long as she does the same and stay on the right path, and she apologized and agreed. After that, we would rarely see Sally, because she kept in touch with our daughters, since they were still good friends, which she didn't have many of, and I didn't want her to lose that support system. But when we did see her, it would be at the maximum small talk. A couple of days ago, Sally called and asked if she could have a conversation with me and my husband, as it was really important to her, and she needed to get this off her chest in person. We agreed, and yesterday we met with her and her husband. After basic pleasantries, she started apologizing about everything that happened. She opened up and started explaining her childhood and how she was SA by her dad and uncle, and growing up she thought that was the way daughters were supposed to show love to their dads. With my husband being nice to her, and her having a distorted view on how to interact with a male in a fatherly role, she responded the way she was used to. It was a long conversation, and I'm not going to get into too many details, but overall, she said she realizes today how disgusting and inappropriate her actions were, and she's very ashamed of what she did, and has been doing a lot of counseling work on herself, and wants to apologize personally to us for everything she did. After a lot of crying on both parts, she said that she and her husband were pregnant, and she wanted us to be involved in the child's life as the grandparents, and she wanted to rebuild trust with us and earn our forgiveness. My husband told her he forgave her a long time ago, and I told her the same, and I hold no ill will against her, but I felt like it was best if we remained distant with each other. I just feel like overall too much has happened, and it would be hard to move past that. She started sobbing, and I felt so bad. Her husband kind of got mad at me and said it took a lot of courage for her to come to us and open up about everything and ask for forgiveness. I said I 100% agree, and I'm very proud of her and appreciate her for coming to us. But I think we're both comfortable with where we are in each other's lives right now, and it should stay that way. But I wish her nothing but the best and will always have love in my heart for her. She was very upset, but said she understands and thanked us. My husband and I hugged her, then they left. Afterwards, my husband told me he thinks that I was wrong for not wanting to give her another chance. I said, "You don't think we need space between us after what's happened in the past?" He said, "We've had 10 years of space. She's a grown adult now, and I think we should all move on from what she did as a teenager." I think we should all move on, but I don't know if still being involved in each other's lives with everything that's happened is the best idea. I know I'm acting selfishly out of interest of my own comfort, but I just don't know if that's the right decision. So, am I the a-hole for saying me and my husband shouldn't get involved in our foster daughter's life again? Edit. Addressing some things mentioned. 1. I'm actually surprised my husband wants to give her another chance. After the second incident, he wanted to go completely no contact outside of finishing paying for her school, since we had already told her we'd take care of that, and wanted to tell our daughters to cut her off. But I thought that was the most harmful route, so I would call to make sure she was okay every now and then, and helped her adjust a little after graduation. But after that, told her that would be the last direct involvement she'd be getting from us. 2. My daughters have said they will be child-free. I didn't think it'd be best to tell them what happened to save Sally the embarrassment. They are friends, but aren't super close. It's more of a how's life conversation every few months. 3. Before the first incident, when she was 17, things were very good and we were talking about proceeding with adoption, which she was receptive about. Looking back, now I feel like this could have possibly been a trigger, given her history with her dad, and that would make my husband legally her new dad. After that, we stopped talking about adoption to let the tension settle and see how things would go. When the second incident happened, things were kind of almost back to normal. I feel like all this also adds to her request that we be grandparents to the baby, because if we had ended up going through with adoption, we would have been a real family, and legally the grandparents. So it's like she wants that relationship that we had back. 4. I am so happy with where she is right now. The reason me and husband started fostering is because we wanted to help kids get a life they may not have otherwise had. And I feel like in part we did that. We helped her get her grades up and get into university. We then paid for said university, and when she finished, we helped her get set up in an apartment and look for jobs so she wouldn't feel like a fish out of water. After that, we stopped contact and decided to go our separate ways, mainly due to the concern that she may try something again, or even accuse my husband of something. And I thank God she stayed on the right track and has succeeded on her own. I do love her, but sometimes I think it's better to love someone from a distance. I just don't know if this should be one of those cases still. 5. Honestly, I don't know what I'm worried about. It's like a jumble of thoughts. Part of me is like, what if she has actually changed? And another part of me is like, what if she hasn't? And another part is, what if next time she accuses my husband of SA? And another part is like, maybe she just wants to be loved. And another part says it's too risky. That poor woman had her entire concept of family twisted and distorted by her aggressors. You didn't know that at the time, and neither of you wanted to push, understandably so. She couldn't understand just how wrong she was until now. Trauma and learned behaviors from childhood SA can last decades, even with the best help you can find, so I can't fault her. You aren't exactly comfortable with your husband being around her due to her past actions, which, while needing to view them through the lens of her trauma, is understandable. This is just a sad situation all around. There are no a-holes. There's no one walking away happy. I hope you can all find peace. Reading the post, I got the impression that only now she really understood why what she did was wrong. I could be gullible, but I'd have tried to move on, especially considering how big of a rock star your husband seems to be, always rejecting her advances, placing clear boundaries, and communicating with you. That being said, I don't feel comfortable calling you the a-hole either, because I don't know what you feel when you look at her after you know that she's tried to sleep with your husband multiple times, and that's not something you can really control with logic. As a former foster kid whose foster parents are still a part of her life, I can see both sides of this. I can see why she would want you guys to be there for her and be grandparents, as you haven't hurt her in the way her family has. And she could more than likely still use that support going down the road to ensure she stays good. Not that it's your job to do so, but even just emotional support goes a long way. But on your side, I can see why you wouldn't want to risk going down that road again, because even the smallest chance that that could happen again is probably replaying in your mind. It does seem like you are holding on to it a bit, so I also don't feel like calling you the a-hole is appropriate. Your comfort is also important. I hope your husband and foster kid understand that as well. But to be honest, I don't know where I would be without the support of my bonus family. That's what we call each other. So, I met John 10 years ago, and we got married 6 years ago. He's wonderful, kind, loving, and funny. You wouldn't know otherwise that he's had a tragic past. He got married to a sweetheart back in his home country and was married to her for 15 years. His country was torn apart by war, and it made the news at the time, until everyone forgot about it. During this time, he lost his wife and firstborn daughter in a wartime casualty that was both shocking and horrific. According to his surviving daughter, he has always been kind and strong, even when things got this bad. She's living in another country, so she's not in our life much as a grown woman with her own life. She's an artist, so sweet. But she seems like her father. John moved to our country about 12 years ago, shortly before I met him. I found him amazing with bright eyes and stupid jokes that are also kind of endearing. After a few years of courtship, we got married. My family has never been fond of him, partly due to our age difference, but also because he's a foreigner, although they won't admit it and mask it under other things they think to pick on him about. They correct his accent, make his hobbies, woodcraft and gardening, look unmasculine, and generally correct him when he says something wrong, usually mispronouncing words or making malapropism, like he's a small child. They don't care that he's gainfully employed with a good job as a teacher, now with tenure, that he's a wonderful and caring husband. The big one was when they found out that John remembers the anniversaries that his wife used to share. There are 4 of them: her birthday, their wedding anniversary, his first daughter's birthday, and the day of her death. I never minded this. He was with her a long time, and his dedication is admirable. And it's not like he always brings her up. Sometimes she comes up in a story or two, but it's rarely about her. I don't feel her as a competition, and the only things we have of her are a few photos and some memorabilia in a box that he'll bring out on those special occasions. She seemed like a wonderful woman, and I wish I could have met her. The celebrations are short, usually a visit to church with a candle lighting, some prayers, and he visits a tree on the campus where he works and talks to it like it's his wife, since he has no grave to visit. Then he usually gives a gift to the local homeless or food shelter in her or his late daughter's name. I always help him, and he's always grateful. He mentions me in the present tense when he talks to the tree, and he doesn't mind when I'm there, although sometimes he wants to be alone for half an hour or so, which I respect. I suspect he cries a little. Last year, we went to his home country and visited the area where she died. It's now part of a shopping plaza built in the early 2000s. Their economy has done well since the late 1990s. It was a bit much for him emotionally, and he collapsed. His daughter and I had to fly him back home early, and I confess, the event left me so drained I accidentally told my mother what happened. Well, for a year now, they keep bringing it up. "You're just a surrogate," my older sister said. "That's so ghoulish," my father commented. Is he mentally handicapped? Like, has the mind of a young boy? Was his brain damaged by a shell casing or something? My mother is always trying to get me to distrust him. I bet he wishes she was still alive and you would be gone just like that, with a snap of her fingers. They tell me that as a second marriage, I married used goods. That's particularly hurtful because I divorced my first husband, which they said was a mistake, and also he was our race. But I left him because he was so cold and distant and wanted lots of children, but I could never conceive. Am I used goods? Well, I shouldn't have asked that. My ex is still friends with my family, and I suspect he's biding his time to take me back, but no thank you. I wish my ex would find another woman and have all the babies he wants with her, but I suspect unless someone does it for him, he'll still be at the family gatherings. I love my family, I really do, but they are so frustrating. They are very traditional, and so they view me as some kind of wayward lost little girl who should have stayed married, had lots of kids with a stoic husband, and definitely not had gotten divorced and married a foreign teacher who talks to a tree 4 times a year. They don't know that part. Can you imagine? It's making family gatherings uncomfortable, and I miss the fun we used to have. Am I so strange to love this man? Am I a fool? Wow, your family is a bunch of insensitive a-holes. He will always love her. That is something to love about him as well, because if you were to die today, he would likely continue to honor you in the same way. Just because he loved his wife doesn't mean he can't love someone else. Your family has no idea what kind of things he's gone through. How fortunate for them to be able to afford such naivety. We have been married for 2 years. Before we got together, she was with a guy named X for several years. They were on the verge of moving in together when she dumped him. I met her a few months after. They share a whole friend group and have always stayed in touch. They didn't talk every day, but about twice a month would catch up via text or FaceTime. She never hid it from me or lied about it. I've met him a few times and he seemed like a stand-up guy. He even came to our wedding and said he had a great time. My problem started when he died in a terrible accident a few months later. I was on a business trip when my wife went to his funeral. She did invite me to go, but I couldn't get out of it. She was broken up about it, but no more or less than anyone who has had someone they care about die. I thought she was over it until we recently found out she was pregnant. We had more trouble than we expected, and she never wanted to get her hopes up, so last week was the first time we started talking baby names. She wants to give our son X's first or last name as his middle name. They're both common names, so nobody would immediately make that connection, but I don't want to think of her ex every time I look at my kid. I'm heartbroken that she wants to. She says he was such a big part of her life and we should honor his memory. Plus, we wouldn't be together if she hadn't ended things with him. I said I'd think about it, but I don't really know what to tell her. Our marriage is otherwise perfect. Should I let this go? How will I ever get past this? Everyone has their own boundaries and deal breakers. It doesn't have to be rational. Although it's completely understandable why you would have this as a hard boundary, and no one would fault you for that. Ask her how she would feel if you were to be hung up on giving your daughter your ex-girlfriend's name. Husband's mother-in-law was in contact with his ex-wife since she cheated on him and divorced her 5 or 6 years ago. Although we pay $600 a month in child support and have 50-50, she sends copious amounts of clothes and gifts to this woman for our stepdaughter, including money, which she pockets and does not spend on stepdaughter. When husband and I first got together, we told mother-in-law we weren't okay with the gift giving to bio mom, and she started sending the gifts to us instead. I eventually donated most of it because it was way too much. 30 purses, 400 hair ties, etc. After attempting to get along with mother-in-law for several years, she decides her atheist son is simply unsupportable and begins berating him about religion every time she sees or speaks with him. 2016 wedding. Relationships get strained close to our wedding, 2017, when they come to visit from Hawaii. For our wedding, she demands she be in charge of the candy table. She yells at my husband the entire day to make sure she has all her supplies. Meanwhile, the rest of us are setting up the rest of the wedding. We had a Tux Fu bar where they gave half the men children's sizes, so we were trying to solve that problem. I couldn't get sister-in-law to come to the venue ahead of time, so I had to go pick her up from her house to get her there. She is in the wedding as a bridesmaid. Mother-in-law keeps stepdaughter away from us the entire wedding week so they can powwow. Lastly, father-in-law constantly comments about how this marriage needs to last this time, and hopefully this is the last one, after making a big stink about how he had to be the best man. He didn't give a speech, didn't say a single nice thing, congrats, or even say hi to me at the wedding. After the wedding, we confront mother-in-law and father-in-law about how selfish they were the entire week. We are told we are crazy and dramatic, and that mother-in-law did not in fact yell at my husband the entire day. We stopped talking to them as a result. About 2 full years ago now. Fast forward a bit. Stepdaughter's bio mom gets knocked up after a slew of boyfriends. Far as I can tell, husband made her put in an IUD right after she had stepdaughter. As soon as the IUD expired, she got knocked up. Checks out with her history. She got pregnant with stepdaughter on purpose, at her own admission, after a few months of dating husband at 19. Now that baby brother is here, bio mom has gotten rid of stepdaughter's dogs and moved in her great-grandmother. Great-grandma and stepdaughter share stepdaughter's bed. Great-grandma is here to take care of the baby for bio mom. She did the same when stepdaughter was born. We are currently pregnant with mother-in-law's actual grandchild, but she is constantly fawning all over ex-wife's new baby. Sister-in-law even calls herself aunt to this kid she has no relationship with. I do not interact with any of these women, but manage to see mother-in-law Instagram. Pics of new baby all over the place with congrats from her friends. I told my husband when she dies, I'm getting her a giant golden deuce and putting it on her grave as a gravestone. Her epitaph will read, Mother-in-law, always like nice crap. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law are doing you a huge favor by not caring about your kid. Why would you possibly want that, given what you described? Instead of focusing on what they are doing for bio mom, be grateful they haven't fixated on your baby. The monster should never meet your child, so there is zero relationship. I'm at a loss of what to do. We have been together for over 4 years and engaged for over 1. We've had such a great relationship this whole time. We're great at communicating. We don't try to control one another. We have fun together and similar interests. Whenever we do argue, we're respectful and hear each other out. I graduated college in May and we moved to another state, 1,500 miles away from home, for him to go to grad school. We've basically lived together almost our entire relationship, and so we share a bedroom and have a joint bank account. I make significantly more than him, and I just got a promotion where my pay will increase by roughly $14,400 a year starting in January. He told me about 2 weeks ago now that he is having doubts about our relationship, but he still wanted to get married. This completely blindsided me because I've always thought our relationship was wonderful and we were soulmates. I wasn't aware of any problems. We talked it out and I thought it was resolved, but it came back up on Saturday. This time, with him saying he wasn't sure he wanted to get married. Marriage has never been important to him, but it's important to me, and in the past, he said I'm worth it. We talked it out, and he said he did want to get married, and I thought everything would be okay. Last night, he brought it up again, and he's leaning toward canceling the wedding. I'm devastated. I never want to control him or make him do something he doesn't want to do. He's scared that we'll get a divorce in the future, and that the implications of that will be bad. He says he loves me so much, but he doesn't want to promise forever to me because he doesn't know if that's how he'll feel forever. I'm trying to be empathetic towards how he feels, and I know marriage is a scarier thing to men than it is to women, but I just don't know what to do. He said if he thinks I'll break up with him, then he'll probably get married, but he might resent me for it. That's the last thing I want, and I don't want to lose him. But I can't promise that this won't hurt me and make me want to take a few steps back from our relationship. He wants us to just stay how we are, but I don't know how much of that I can do. I don't think it's fair to me for our finances to remain tied with no marriage, and I don't know if I can keep living with him without wanting to cry, thinking about what I almost had. At the same time, I don't want my love for him to seem contractual, and he can't pay for all of his expenses without my help or racking up a bunch of student debt. He said he hasn't made up his mind yet, but we're running out of time. I've been so anxious these past 2 weeks. I've only eaten 3 full meals in this time. I have to figure out how to tell my parents this if he decides to postpone the wedding. And I know they'll be so disappointed. I have to figure out how to pay them back all the money they've spent. I was so looking forward to officially being life partners and reading our vows to each other. Shallowly, I was looking forward to wearing my beautiful dress and seeing him at the end of the aisle. I was looking forward to officially being part of his family and being an aunt to his sister's kids. I just don't know what to do, and I don't know how to heal myself from this and tell everyone if this is what he decides. Any advice is welcome. He's told you 3 times now that he doesn't want to get married. My advice would be to believe him. Exactly this. He is doing you a favor by clearly telling you that he doesn't want to marry you. Listen to him and leave him so you can find someone who does want to marry you. I have had many friends over the years who married people that had second thoughts or got married because they felt they had to. All of those people are divorced now, and they spent too many years of their life with the wrong person. Go, leave him, and make room for the right guy to come along. It will hurt in the short term, but be so much better for you in the long term. Edit. This is the first major problem our relationship has ever had. He knows how difficult this is for me, but it sucks because it's just as difficult for him. Our entire relationship, he's never had any mental struggles, but this is giving him anxiety as severe as mine. What kind of partner would I be if I abandoned him? But at the same time, I'm not sure how to heal myself. It's a bad situation all around. My God, you need to have some self-respect. This man is literally telling you that he does not want to marry you and might resent you for it. What kind of partner will I be if I abandon him? Newsflash. He is literally abandoning you. This man is out the door, and here you are, worried about him and his feelings instead of yours. Christ. Men do this thing where they beat around the bush but can't come right out and say things because they don't want to lose whatever benefit they are getting from you. He is leeching off you. My brother, sister-in-law, and her parents are visiting my wife and I for a week because we live in the same city as sister-in-law's brother, who is graduating this week from college. They are here a week early just to spend time with us and to visit us for the first time at a new house we bought recently. We have a pool, and the temperatures have been basically scorching for the past couple of weeks. My wife's between some contracts at work, so she's been enjoying the sunshine and cooling off more so than usual. Apparently, this is something my sister-in-law isn't comfortable with, and get this, not for herself, but for her parents' sake. She told me, through my brother once and direct in a heated conversation, how some of my wife's behavior is a little beneath her age and disrespectful to our guests. What is this behavior, you ask? That she sunbathes, sometimes topless, around the pool, which is a good 30 yards from the house, on its own corner of the property. that she sometimes spends time in her bathing suit at home when she's hopping in and out. And this is what got me almost to rage at her. That apparently she has the audacity not to maybe wear an annoying bra when it's nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside, for a place and house designed to be getting no more than 70 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, even in summers. Yes, we live in coastal California. I lost my cool, called her a perv, then later apologized to my brother and her, but told her that any more comments and she's not welcome to stay here anymore. Her parents, being old and polite through this, can definitely stay. It's simple. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Guests don't get to dictate how you dress and conduct yourself in your own home. If they don't like it, they're absolutely well within their right to get a hotel.